water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony.
But then there was fire, and with fire came disparity. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark.
Fire. For early humans, fire was everything. It gave them light in the darkness, heat in the cold, safety from predators, and most importantly, a place to cook. Sources for the first flames are most likely lightning strikes or sparks that would land on grass that was dry enough to ignite. No matter where humans went, they would bring fire with them. From the very beginning, humans were trying to understand how their ancestors had learned how to harness this force of nature. According to Greek myth, fire was actually granted to the humans by a god named Prometheus. In most of the myths and legends, Prometheus represents a bit of a trickster. The story goes that Prometheus stole the fire from the gods and gave it to humans. He was punished by Zeus for this by being chained to a rock where an eagle would come and tear out his liver for the rest of eternity. The origins for this myth kind of make sense to me. When you think about it, if Zeus was the one controlling the lightning, and early humans were able to gather it from lightning strikes that would start wildfires, then this story is kind of close to the truth. Just a different interpretation of the events, I guess. Apparently one contributor to this story is the old famous philosopher Plato. Philosophy represented a bit of an interesting development in human society, because rather than just counting on explanations from invisible forces like gods or spirits, philosophers tried to come to a direct understanding of the natural world. They tried to separate the real and physical that humans could have an effect over from the immaterial and the divine, which they had no input over. All ancient civilizations have a form of religion, which is used as a way to explain everything, why the world is the way it is. Greek philosophy, though, is notable because it tries to come to a direct understanding of nature that does not require an unseen hand or some sort of other influence to guide it. Plato and his many students, Aristotle among them, felt that the world could be understood in its entirety. The notion of some form of magical influence was largely disregarded by the Greek philosophers. They felt that nature had a mechanism that could be understood. These four elements were once believed to be the four components that made up the physical world. At times they exist in balance and the world is in harmony, but other times they become unbalanced, which causes change. Mastery over the understanding of these elementary parts of nature was a goal that many philosophers across the world had spent entire lifetimes contemplating, in an attempt to understand the natural world around them and how the physical elements interacted with each other. A philosopher by the name of Empedocles was the one who would establish the theory of the four elements. Strangely enough, it was actually Plato who started to call them the elements. For philosophers, their minds were the greatest assets they had to understand how the world fit together. And the field of natural philosophy, the logical study of the physical universe, was basically the predecessor to all fields of science: biology, chemistry, and most importantly, physics. Aristotle would actually refine this theory into the form that would become the most well-known. Aristotle's theory of the elements divided them into elemental components: earth, water, fire, and air. Aristotle theorized that everything was made up of these four parts, just combined in different ways. His theory stated that the sublunary sphere, that is, everything in the universe that was inside of the moon's orbit, was composed of these four elements. He wasn't sure about how everything would be created from them, which he held as up for debate, but he had many real-world examples of this theory in practice, such as fire. The fire rises quickly, but the smoke rises slower. If you put some earth in the water, you can see the air rise to the top, while the earth will stay near the bottom. The theory stated that the sun and stars were actually made out of a fifth element, known as the ether. Aristotle thought that the four earthly elements were corruptible. They could combine, become mixed, and cause physical changes and chaos that we're familiar with on our planet. Looking into the history of the theory of the elements, it does appear that the concept of these four classical elements may have actually originated in the East, with the creation of Buddhism. Civilizations both in the East and West developed a similar model, even with a fifth element known as the ether, a type of unearthly, ethereal, or celestial stuff. Sure, they might have changed some of the elements, like added wood or metal, but fire, earth, air, and water seem to be very common. Taking a hands-on look at this theory, it actually kind of holds up for a lot of situations, with a clever enough interpretation. But we don't use this theory in modern times, do we? As time passed and more people tried to understand the physical world, the theory would eventually evolve as they crafted logical models that would be able to explain the physical phenomena of the universe. On this channel, we've talked about the founding of the atomic theory by Democritus and the advancement of that theory by early practitioners of chemistry, alchemists. The progression from natural philosophy to modern science is quite remarkable in its own right. The advancement of humanity's understanding of the physical world has progressed to awe-inspiring heights. Instead of elements, we understand the physical world today in terms of elementary particles. These tiny objects are the building blocks of matter. Everything physical, anything you can touch, and even stuff that you shouldn't, is made up of three different particles: protons, neutrons, and electrons. So is the old theory of the elements useless? Well, not entirely. For illustrative purposes, it actually works as a pretty intuitive way to describe the four states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Earth is solid, water a liquid, air is gas, and fire a plasma. The old elemental theory only really worked if it assumed that the center of the Earth was the center of the universe. Maybe in the past, the known universe only included the Earth. But over time, with study of the heavens, scholars eventually had to rework the old theory into one that was more complete. Galileo and Newton were the ones who would eventually prove this, proving that the sun was in the center of the solar system, and somehow it had so much mass that the force of gravity actually made our planet revolve around it, instead of the other way. Proving this took centuries of scientific advancement, and the Bronze Age collapse and the resulting Dark Ages didn't exactly speed things up. It took a millennium before humanity would once again contemplate the rules of the world in which they lived. An advancement of human thought that many of us, I would say, take for granted.